At first, I was strictly just working in Midjourney itself, and then when ChatGPT became more available, I said, "Oh, there's got to be a way to bring these two things together."
Hi, and welcome to Imagine Creativity Through AI Art. And I'm here today with Tango'One, also known as Jonathon Wood, one of my favorite people on the Midjourney Discord server. And Jonathon, we're going to talk about why you're one of my favorite people on the Discord server, because you run one of my favorite image jams to be in. But let's start before we tell people about what you are famous for, let's talk about how you got started with Midjourney and sort of your journey with Midjourney.
Sure. Well, first of all, you're too kind, and you're going to blush, but thank you. So I've been fascinated with the concept of large language models and natural learning ever since I heard about GPT-1 a couple of years ago when nobody could access it, right? I saw an article on Wired, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I can start, thinking of all these cool uses for it. And then I kind of forgot about it because, again, unless you are a licensed academic, you didn't have access to it. So when ChatGPT 3 first became available, I dabbled into it but didn't understand it, so I kind of promptly forgot about it. And then I happened to be on some random Reddit subreddit, I don't remember which one, and somebody had posted an image that they had made on this new tool called Midjourney. I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting. So went to go check it out and spent a day trying to figure out what the heck this Discord thing was, because I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, that was my stumbling block as well, right at the first. Yeah, trying to figure out Discord. Yeah,
it's a little intimidating at first, but yeah, once I found that, I got into the Midjourney channel, and I just saw the explosion of creativity, and I was blown away. So I dipped my toes and struggled like everybody else, and my first images were just awful. Now, granted, that was 4 versions ago in Midjourney.
So was it Midjourney 2 or 3?
2.
2. Okay, so that was before the public release, right?
Yeah. So I got in. I got a beta invite, and I could see the possibilities, but I also saw that it was pretty rough. So I didn't really do anything until Midjourney 3 came out, and that's when I started to try to get serious about learning how to do it. And at first, I was strictly just working in Midjourney itself. And then when ChatGPT became more available, I said, oh, there's got to be a way to bring these two things together. A couple of people had already started talking on the Discord servers about using GPT. So I spent probably a couple months just kind of reading and trying to understand what they were doing, and didn't really start bringing them together until, well, I kind of got frustrated, to be honest.
I think I looked it up. The image jam came out in December 22. So that's not long after the public release of ChatGPT. What was that, 3? I think it was 3 at the time.
Yeah, it was. So I had read a couple articles that people have posted online about how to use ChatGPT to create a Midjourney script, and they were just awful. Like, they didn't do what they were supposed to. So I'm like, all right, well, let me try to figure this out. So I started by just taking some work others had done and trying to rewrite it and emulate it into a more usable format. And then once that seemed to work, I just started going wild and creating all kinds of varieties of very niche scripts. So if you kind of look at the history of the image jam, there's a clear pattern of, at first everybody wanted to just be a generalist, so creating scripts that would just give you randomized output. And then people started to go, oh, well, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that. So we started to get more and more niche, and so there was this explosion of scripts. Somebody wanted to do something on race cars, somebody wanted to do space, somebody wanted to do models and stuff like that. So I just started, again, just playing around with no real direction and just trying to figure out, how can I get how can I write a set of instructions for ChatGPT that really focus on, one particular kind of output or style or genre, and then posted those back to the Discord channel, and it was just a constant iteration of discussion with other folks, and everybody had new ideas, and I would try to fold those in. So I found myself working in kind of two different camps. There was, let's just create something new and cool, and let's take an idea that somebody has and help them figure out how to do that particular thing. So I ended up with, I haven't even looked lately, but I would imagine there's probably 300 different GPT scripts on my hard drive somewhere.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Every time I go into the jam, it's like, oh my gosh, there's like 12 new scripts since like yesterday. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of these scripts? Because especially if you started with ChatGPT 3, and now I use them in 4, and I also use them in Claude, which works just fine. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually kind of get in, I won't use a healthy discussion with folks all the time about prompt length. Does it need to be short? Does it need to be long? Everyone out there is wrong. Doesn't matter what their answer is. Prompts have to be short. You're wrong. Prompts have to be long. You're wrong. Everything works. It doesn't matter. These tools are good enough to work with whatever you give them. Now, there's absolutely ways to influence your output. The shorter your prompt, the more likely you are to get every element in your prompt in your image.
Okay.
The longer your prompt, things towards the beginning are almost certainly going to be in your image. Things later on the prompt may or may not be there. But everything you put in your prompt influences the output. And you can test this yourself. It's not a matter of opinion. You can create any prompt you want. You can get the seed for it. You can change one little thing in your prompt, even down to adding a comma or taking a comma away using the same seed, and you will get a different image. So everything you put there does have an influence, but it's really just, in my opinion, it's up to personal style. Do you want to be, more descriptive and more literary in the way you describe things? Great, that works. Do you want to be super succinct and get the prompt as abbreviated as possible? That'll work too. It's just a different philosophy of how do you go about getting to the place you want to get to.
And Midjourney is not going to give you an error or anything. Some of the other AI have word limits on them, but token limits. But Midjourney, just whatever, give me a 400-word prompt. Okay. Now, whether it will do it or not is another story, but do what you ask for.
Yeah, and for those that do like longer prompts, if you're using, I think it became available as a parameter with Midjourney 5.1. There's a parameter you can use called style raw.
Okay.
If you use a longer prompt, put style raw in there, and you're more likely to get what you're aiming for than if not.
That's a great tip. Yeah, and that style raw grew out of version 5, which was very photographic realism. And style raw was a way of keeping that, correct?
Yeah, that's how it was explained. I found in practice that it works for any genre of prompting you want. If you use that parameter, it seems to me that it makes Midjourney's parser be a little more literal with what you put in.
Okay. Well, that's a good tip. Yeah, it's a really good tip. And so less of Midjourney sort of just winging it, and more of saying that, more of a guidance scale, which you'd get on Stable Diffusion, which you can control.
Yeah. So, as I've played more with Stable Diffusion, I tend to think of it a lot like the CFG parameter. A higher CFG value, the interpreter is going to be much more literal with what you put in. Style raw seems to have a similar effect.
Okay, so that's a good tip. We should know. We should use style raw. If it's not giving us what we want, try style raw and see if we can make it listen to the words a little bit more closely.
Yeah, absolutely. Another little trick I like to use, and this is also very debated in the community, the stylized parameter.
Okay.
it's kind of funny. Even in the documentation, it's not very clear what it does. It basically says a higher stylized value will make your art pretty.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means exactly, but I love it. I almost always default to the highest possible value, which in J5 is 1,000.
1,000, yeah.
I tend to start there. The only time I'll back it off is if there's something very specific I'm trying to achieve. Like the other day, I was trying to do an avatar for somebody that wanted to take just a normal headshot that they had and kind of suit them up in a soccer outfit for a particular team. I had to take the stylized down for it to render the uniform authentic.
Yeah, that's my understanding of stylized, especially since the last upgrade, one before it, where they actually that stylized works a lot more faithfully, I guess is how I kind of understand it. Before it was sort of working, but I guess now it's working a lot more sensitively. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. It's
I definitely noticed. Before it didn't really matter if you went between stylized 200 and 1,000. Like there wasn't a lot of discrete variation between them. I've noticed a lot more graduated. I don't even know how to describe it. More distinct outputs at different values for stylized.
So just try different stylized values, 100, 200, 300, 500. Yeah.
Exactly.
And just try them out and see what happens.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the image jam I was talking about. And it is, if you're in the Midjourney server, okay, so if you come down here for folks who have never played in the image jams before, so they're under the community forums. Actually, they're not in the community forums, but okay. Image jams, and there's a bunch of them here. I mean, what is there, 50-something image jams?
Yeah, every time one falls off my, recent list there, it takes forever to find one because there's a lot.
Right. If you've been active in them, they tend to show up here. That's why you're getting the list that I'm getting, but you'll probably get a different list if you've been active in different ones. But the one we're in right now is this ChatGPT prompt generation for Midjourney. So is there, I'm just fascinated because this has been going on for, 10 months now, about.
Yeah,
so
it feels like a lot longer.
It has some history to it. So do you want to talk a little bit about what goes into one of these prompts? The kind of things that show up in a ChatGPT prompt? I can stop and show one if you'd like.
Yeah, so there's a few different forms of prompts that you'll find if you kind of look back through the history of this. There's some that are very focused on achieving a particular result. So the way those tend to work is there's a little bit of preamble at the start of the script that says, here's what I'm trying to do. Here are some guidelines for what I want the output to be, and then, describing the specifics of what you want.
Here, I'll expand one of these. This is the one I've just run across here.
Yeah. And then there's others that are more kind of free form. And they will take a little more of a format of a kind of a lesson plan. If you think about how a teacher would sit down and think about how they're going to instruct somebody on something. And then there's a third category that are very, very different. So you'd have to scroll back pretty far in the list to get one of these, but there's some, for instance, I created a set around the video game Darkest Dungeon, which has a very particular art style. So to try to get ChatGPT to create a prompt for Midjourney in that style, I actually took a lot of the text from the game itself and fed that into ChatGPT as background material. So there's like 3 or 4 input scripts before we get to anything about Midjourney that says, here's the kind of style I want you to emulate. And here's a whole bunch of examples.
Because in ChatGPT, we can give it context and we can give it background. Okay. Exactly. And then, so you've given it the background and then you run your image script.
Exactly.
Like this image script, and then tell it what to actually do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so some of these scripts are kind of one shots where you can just take the entire text, throw it into ChatGPT, hit submit, and it'll start giving you output. There are others that are longer, and because of the context window limits, you'll have to load it in parts, like we note in the script here.
Okay.
I think
So that's
users
why
should
it's
be
labeled part 3 here.
exactly.
Okay.
Now, if you choose to use Claude, it has a much larger context window, so these longer scripts you can probably do as a one shot there as well.
And so this one is creating for folks who haven't played with this before. So this one is creating. Okay, so let's see, what is this one creating?
Yeah, so this is trying to use a particular art style. So I stumbled across a Tumblr post that was labeled Midwest Gothic. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I started doing a little bit of research on the art style, and there's a whole bunch of subgenres within it. So I created a number of scripts that kind of emulate these different styles. So this one here,
Okay,
it gives
so
you
here,
some
these
information.
subgenres.
Exactly. So these different subgenres to steer the prompts towards a particular kind of output. So this is a combination script of both generalist and specific, trying to get a specific kind of output, but giving the script a lot of freedom within it to go across several different subgenres.
And then your output then, for those of you who haven't used these scripts before, you feed it into ChatGPT and it will give you a prompt. It won't give you an image. It will give you a prompt to put into Midjourney, and then you'll get these images. So anyone can write one of these scripts. There's lots of folks on here who are active writing their own scripts. Do you have like favorite scripts that people have written?
It changes all the time, to be perfectly honest. Every time I see an interesting image, I always kind of go look up that person and see what else they've done. And if they happen to be active in this forum, this channel, or the other GPT channel, there's actually a second one out there as well. I'll look and
is it in Midjourney or is it in the ChatGPT?
It's in the image jams as well. It
Okay.
has been as used in a while, but so this one that we're in right now is actually the second GPT image jam.
Okay.
And the one was actually there first. Yeah, so one of the things I'll sometimes do is when somebody does post a script in here, I'll take it and see if I can either make it a little more user friendly or expand it in different ways. So there's a lot of examples in this channel of people kind of taking one person's idea and iterating on it and posting it back, and then somebody else takes it and does something else. So it's a fun community. We all tend to help each other out and get along. So we love building on each other's stuff. I can't necessarily call out a specific script that I'm just in love with, because I love all my babies. And everyone else's babies too.
And everyone else's little babies. When I write scripts, one of the common things to do, let me see if I just, let me pull up one of these scripts here. I have scrolled past them. Okay, I'll see. Okay. So sometimes I see a sentence before this, and I usually use a sentence before this to tell ChatGPT who it is today. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So is that common practice to say you are an art director?
It used to be much more common than I see people doing now. I think with GPT-4, as more people are getting access to it, there seems to be not necessarily move away from it, but less reliance on the idea of spending a paragraph telling it who it is. And if you actually look at some of the GPT documentation or articles written by people from OpenAI, they talk about how that's not really necessary. I still like to do it because I like to, I don't know, in my head, I'm just giving more helpful information to the generator about how I want it to act. So I like to say, you're an art director, or you're a fashion designer, or you're a, cartographer. You have experience across, and then you put together some descriptors about that particular industry or whatever. I'm going to need you to help me create detailed textual descriptions to feed to an AI generator that will create images based on the output. Sometimes I'll even throw in things like, particularly if it's a more esoteric concept, I'll put in something like, pretend you're instructing a painter that has never seen an example of the kind of thing we're talking about. Give it enough details that that person could accurately create a rendering of your description. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that absolutely required? Probably not. I like to do it. I figure, you've got plenty of room in the context window, so why not be as descriptive about what you want as possible?
And if nothing else, it gets our brains sort of thinking about the specifics of what we want. It helps us organize our thoughts. We would
Absolutely.
like to act like an art director. We would like to act like a fashion designer and create images like that.
Yeah, I've also found that, I do tend to do a lot of research if I'm trying to create a script about something I'm not familiar with. But sometimes I find it's actually helpful before I actually write the script itself to just have a conversation with GPT about the thing. So let's say, you wanted to create a script that was good at giving you oil paintings of dinner scenes. If you didn't know anything about oil painting or how to create a good image, you could just start asking it questions. Hey, GPT, tell me everything you can about the elements of oil painting or capturing still lifes or whatever. And just have a back and forth conversation, and you'll get a lot of detail that you can later then put into your script.
And we are going to give ChatGPT some detail here. So we do give it some art direction. Many times there are at least key characteristics that you call out and say, please, do a genre in history, or pick a like a weather pattern for a landscape, something very specific, a specific characteristic from the scene you're trying to create.
Absolutely. So for a while, me and a few others were really wanting to get cool images of lightsaber fights. And so we got super detailed about the different colors of lightsabers and what each one means and what it emphasizes. And we fed all that in, and we did find that the outputs were aligned. So, if we said we wanted a green lightsaber, then it would tend to give us scenes with details that called out a forest background, or if we used a white bladed lightsaber, it would create images that were more in a very stark hallway or something like that. So
because you sort of set the scene before. You said, if you're going to do this color, then this is what it means in the world of Star Wars.
Exactly. And sometimes it's interesting to just create situations like that and not give it a ton of specific direction afterwards, just to see what it can come up with, both on the GPT side and on the Midjourney side.
I'm a little bit amazed by how much it comes up with sometimes. So like in this particular script, this particular prompt, so it's on military aircraft. So given quite a lot of detail here on what you should expect to see. And then even some specific fighters. So this is a very detailed example of a very detailed prompt.
Yeah, this was one where I was kind of in a mode of being super descriptive with lots of examples to help it really focus, because what I found was when I was trying to prompt for like aerial combat scenes, I would either get very, very modern aircraft or very, very old aircraft and nothing in between. Okay. So I wanted to get a greater variety of aircraft over time. So I kind of broke it down into different generations of aircraft with specific examples, and that seemed to help. If I remember right,
if it's not just choosing correctly the first time, if it has a bias one way or the other, this was a way to get over that. Okay.
You can these models work very well with iteration, right? So you can start with something fairly generic and keep correcting it and getting more and more specific about what you want. That prompt, I think, was written for 5.0. I found since then that with 5.1 and 5.2, you don't need to be nearly as detailed as this to still be able to get a variety of output. So, when you pick up one of these scripts, realize they were written at a point in time and they may function a little differently now than they did when they were written. But that's part of the fun. And, with Midjourney, you can specify which model version you want. So sometimes it's interesting to use one of these scripts, generate a prompt, and then intentionally run that prompt over different versions of Midjourney to see how it changes.
Do you see that there, do these prompts still work in ChatGPT 3.5, or are they almost all written for 4.0?
They will generally still work in 3.5. Some of these longer ones you have to be a little more circumscript with, but they will generally all still work in 3.5.
So if folks don't have the subscription to ChatGPT 4, they can still try this in ChatGPT 3. The free
We're trying Claude while it's still free.
Yeah, well, Claude is still free, yeah. And I find that Claude sometimes doesn't pay attention to maybe like positioning. It like gets all the stuff in there, but maybe like it puts the parameter in the middle of the prompt for some reason, even though we've specifically told it to put it at the end of the prompt. So that's, it's a minor little thing, but it is the thing that with Claude, you may have to just move things around a little bit.
Yeah, I do find... Yeah, I've had the same experience. I do find Claude sometimes, puts things in a weird order. I have found Claude to be more accommodating of you correcting it, and then really going forward. GPT used to be good about that. I found GPT a little harder to correct these days. But Claude is almost begging for you to correct it.
So if you're not getting the output you like, you can just give the large language model a note about the prompt.
Absolutely.
And recently I've noticed in the prompts, and I have totally taken this on board, there is you started adding, and it's probably, I can't find one right this second, but you've started adding like an instruction at the end so that you can, one, run another prompt in this same style, or two, we're in a whole different prompt, or three, I don't remember what the third thing is, but it's nice because you can just put 1, 2, and 3 in there, and you've already instructed it what those numbers mean.
Yeah, I've started adding essentially a little part to the end of the script that says, ask the user if you want them to modify a particular aspect of the current result or create an entirely new result. And then if you do want to modify an element of the current result, what element do you want? And give you a list of choices. Do you want to change the subject, the weather, the lighting, the style, whatever it is? And I did that just purely as an ease of use thing, as I was explaining how some of these scripts work to some people that are much less familiar with these tools. I just tried to make it as easy as possible for them to use them.
Yeah, you technically, when I get lazy, I actually just type another or something in and it's like, give me another, and it knows what I mean. But it's nice that if we have, options at the end, it just says, what would you like me to do next? 1, 2, and 3. It's very nice to just say, oh, well, this is what I want you to do next. So yeah, that's a very handy little add-on. So, folks can be really clever about some of these things. And the parameters, you can ask it to either set specific parameters if you like certain parameters all the time, but there's also some flexibility in like aspect ratio, which I'm surprised it works, but it seems to work. Let me see if this prompt has it in there. Yeah, so here, aspect ratio, you actually let it choose the aspect ratio.
Yeah, I was actually really shocked the first time I tried that and it worked. Basically,
I know.
Midjourney can analyze the prompt that it's created and figure out should it be in landscape or portrait mode or some other. Now sometimes it just guesses. Yeah, it's pretty clear when it's doing that, but yeah, on the balance, it's pretty good about figuring out, should it be wider than longer or longer than wider?
Yeah, I almost always try it with whatever it comes up with, whatever aspect ratio it comes up with, and I almost never change it.
Hmm.
It's pretty good. I mean, sometimes it'll come up with squares and or it'll come out with a video. Yeah, a video aspect ratio.
One time I will change them is if I definitely want more than one subject in the
Mm-hmm.
shot. If it doesn't give me a landscape style aspect ratio, I will change it to be wider. I found, especially in MJ 5.2, a wider aspect ratio will almost always give you multiple subjects.
Okay. Whereas a vertical portrait landscape or portrait aspect ratio more likely to just give you one subject.
Exactly.
Okay. That's good to know too. So if you only want one subject, and you're having a problem with that, maybe change the aspect ratio.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's
yeah,
absolutely a
yeah.
good way to experiment.
So here's an example of that. You're asking ChatGPT to decide on which aspect ratio is best.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is a pattern of prompting here where you're giving it numbers. So you've given it the order, and then you've told it what the numbers equate to.
Yeah, if you want things to always appear in a certain order in your prompt, this is a great way to do it. I use numbers here. You can use letters. You can give it proper variable names, however you like to do it. Um, so you basically say, here's the order I want things in, and then for each of those pieces, here's what I want you to do within those pieces. It gives you a little more control. For those that are a little more advanced with their Midjourney usage and they want to do multi-part prompts where you separate your elements with a double colon, this is a good method to use for generating those kind of outputs.
Because we could just change that to that comma here
Yeah.
to double semicolons or double colons. Yeah. And the other thing is, this kind of thing, you've given it some examples here.
Mm-hmm.
So you've given this examples, but you'll almost always say somewhere, and don't forget other things that I haven't thought about.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
always like to, I like to give GPT in particular some specific examples so it knows what kind of stuff I want, but I want it to use, the full depth of its, repository and knowledge to uh, have more freedom and come up with things that I either don't know to specify or sometimes I'm just lazy and can't be bothered to.
Well, that means you can put in a handful of things, and then you don't have to worry about putting an exhaustive list
Right.
of everything. 242 things that you could put in there. Yeah,
Exactly.
and to say here about five, just to get
Mm-hmm.
the gist. Yeah, and these little instructions I do occasionally run across, even with prompts I've used before. Occasionally, it'll go weird with its punctuation.
Yeah, it's often bad about putting a period at the end after
Mm,
your in parameters, even if you tell it not to.
yeah,
Uh,
which will totally mess up Midjourney, and it will give you an error if that
yeah.
happens. Yeah.
And then, yeah, there's some other things that sometimes GPT will absolutely get into a rut sometimes. And I find if you're offering it corrections and it's not taking them, don't fight it. Just start a whole new conversation and paste your script in again and go from there. You don't have to, argue with the tools. Just let them refresh themselves and go on the narrative.
And for folks who haven't used these tools a lot, if you start a new chat, it will sort of wipe the slate clean and sort of start anew. But if you want to continue with a conversation, use the same chat because then it remembers everything you've chatted about before.
Another usability tip there. So if you have a chat and then you want to come back to it like a week later and you're not sure, does it still remember everything? You can actually ask it that. So when I come back to it, I'll say, remind me what the context is that we're talking about, and it'll kind of summarize the thread itself. Which can also be useful if you're having a long conversation and you start to see it deviating a bit. You can just remind it, hey, refresh your memory of the opening script. Let's make sure we're sticking close to that.
And then you've asked it to specifically reference something older in the conversation.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. Yeah, because it does tend to wander off a little bit sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for folks who want to write their own ChatGPT scripts for Midjourney or for, I guess we didn't even touch on, these are scripts for Midjourney, but they do work in other AI image generators.
More or less.
Yeah, more or less. So, you could take, obviously these come up with /imagine to start with, which definitely is a Midjourney thing, but yeah.
Yeah, my biggest advice is just don't be scared. Just get out there and try stuff. If it doesn't work, try something else. Excuse me. If you want to really dive into the scripting part, look at the thread that we've been talking about here. You're also welcome to click on my profile in Midjourney, and you'll see there's a link to the GitHub I set up it's a repository of a bunch of my scripts. Just take a look at them. Feel free to use them, study them, riff on them, tear them up, and put them back together. It's all there for you to use. So just get out there and experiment. It's like anything else. If you want to get good at it, just do a little bit every day. Keep trying new things.
So there's no problem with folks taking one of your scripts and running it and then tweaking it and seeing what happens next?
Absolutely. I just ask that you post some of your output so we can all see it.
Yeah, so don't be shy about that. And I'll put a link to the Image Jam as well as the GitHub site and some of the other links we've talked about in the show today.
And yeah, experiment with the other tools too. You had called out a few earlier. Leonardo, I use that one a fair bit. It even now has a mobile app, which is pretty good. There's a whole bunch of other services out there. So they all have their strengths and weaknesses. One thing I really love about Leonardo is you can use the same prompt and select different models and see how it performs in the different models and get some wildly different outputs. You can do that with Stable Diffusion, but you've got to do the legwork to pick the models themselves. With Leonardo, you just click the one you want, and it's awesome. Civet AI, their website is another great one. It's a repository of checkpoints and lures and all kinds of cool things. And now they've added the capability to do generation right from the website. So
okay,
a lot of cool tools out there. Midjourney, far and away the easiest to use, in my opinion. It'll get you really high quality output without spending a lot of time studying this stuff. But don't be afraid to dive into some of the other tools. They're all fun to use.
And these ChatGPT scripts are going to be great for just brainstorming and seeing what you can get. I find that one of the benefits of using a ChatGPT script is just to get myself out of my own preferences, my own history. I tend to prompt in a style, and I tend to prompt certain subjects over and over again. And so to kick that, one of the things to do is to run one of these ChatGPT scripts, and it will give you a totally different look, totally different output, totally different subjects. And then you might take a few of those going forward into your own personal toolbox.
Yeah, similarly, another thing I love to do is when I see a cool image out there that somebody else has created, I will use the describe function in Midjourney, give it that reference. Invariably, one of the four outputs at least will come up with some terms I'm unfamiliar with. I'll take those terms, go over to ChatGPT and say, tell me about this term. How can I incorporate this into some of my own artwork? And that'll often prompt me to go off and create a whole nother script. So yeah, you can definitely use these tools to figure out things that you didn't know, and see how that influences your own creations.
I think we all landed in art school when we weren't looking. When this AI came out, I'm like, I've learned so many artists, I've learned so many art styles, and I do a whole series of video on art styles and art terms. And, it's amazing how many, little art terms that you just have to be, if you didn't go to art school, you'd never know about this term. And it will completely change your entire image if you just add this one term in, because Midjourney knows what it is. You just don't happen to know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned a lot too. And, when people ask me, why are you so into this? I'm like, look, I've always had a creative side, but I can't draw a straight line. Like, I've never had the ability to turn what's in my head into output. These tools give you the chance to do that. So everybody can be an artist. I think they're just amazing. And we're just at the very tip of what's possible with these tools. And I encourage everybody to get out there and play with them.
It's all about creativity, isn't it? It is. Well, I'd like to end today with a series of 3 questions. We're calling these the quick fire questions. So quick, short answers. The first thing, what is your go-to AI image generator?
Definitely Midjourney.
Definitely Midjourney. Okay. And what type of image do you like to create? What's your favorite?
I absolutely gear towards photorealism and particularly fashion images. There's another image jam called Fashion Editorial. I'm very active on there as well. We do a weekly Thursday theme series. But yes, I gravitate towards photorealism of people in cool places.
Your inner fashion designer is coming out.
Exactly.
Yeah. What is your biggest aha moment that you've had while you've been working with these tools?
There's been a lot of them. The stylized parameter was a huge one for me. The discovery of how the raw parameter can help your imagery, and then just the realization that I don't have to be overly precise. So I don't have to specify, oh, I want the model wearing a red dress with a pink tap at the top, and a whole bunch of other things. I could just say, use a rosé palette, and it'll, kind of, do all those elements for you. Now, you can be more specific if you want a very specific output, but you don't necessarily have to be overly prescriptive.
Okay, that's a good thing to know. Yeah, that's a very good thing to know, especially for our younger creators who may be a little intimidated by all the things we can do with AI. Sometimes I just write cats. I just do. How many cats per second is Midjourney creating nowadays? Yeah. So, well, thank you, Jonathon, or Tango'One, for coming on the program and giving us some tips. I will put all the links to the ChatGPT things in the show notes. And if you have any other links that you want folks to know about, let me know and I'll pass those along.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This was great fun. I always love talking about this topic, and you're an awesome host. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Well, I've enjoyed it. Well, thank you, Jonathon, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care. Thanks for having me.